let's talk to tech expert Dan Sodergren. Hi, Dan.
Oh, hi there.
Hello, and also to the journalist Zoe Daniel. Hi, Zoe.
Hi.
Hello there, both. Dan, are you surprised by what seems to be a bit of a trend among younger people?
Well, I teach people how to get better at social media and even talk about artificial intelligence now in marketing. So I'm a technologist and a futurologist. You'd think I'd be all for the pace of future going into the future more and more rapidly with technology. But I completely get why young people might want to start disconnecting a little bit and not being so obsessed with smartphones. You've got to remember, we didn't always have smartphones. And of course, dumb phones might actually not be that dumb. It might be a very clever way or a very sensible way of starting to disconnect and not be so addicted to a piece of technology that is relatively new for humankind. You've got to remember, these are pretty new bits of tech, and they are made to be addictive with the apps they have on it. This is what Tristan Harris rightly says, the race to the bottom of the brainstem. They're literally designed so you use them more, and more dopamine's released each time you use it with all its plings and gimmicks and bright colours. So you've got to remember, it's not in a bad way, but they are kind of designed so we use them lots.
I've got mine in my hand right now, and I'm thinking, how could I live without this? It's got everything on here. This is everything to me in terms of contacting people and what I need to do, organising my life, sorting my life out, booking things, keeping in touch with friends. You're not going to get that from a so-called dumb phone, are you?
Well, the thing is, though, if you remember, you say remember, it's like we didn't used to do this in the past. We used to use computers, didn't we?
Yes.
This whole mobile moment, we used to use laptops and things, and so you could quite easily do all those things on your computer, rather than having a mini computer inside your own pocket. So there are ways of doing it, of course, but it's worth remembering that I think a couple of studies have already proven that young people, something like 25% of young people were anxious, maybe even including yourself, when you weren't so close to your phone. And most people keep their phone within 3 meters of them for 95% of the time. And I think that might be a bit of overuse. Remember, you can still do social media and all the clever stuff will work. You just don't have to necessarily do it on your smartphone.
Zoe, you're of this generation that we're hearing are potentially starting to look away from the smartphone. Have you noticed this as a trend amongst your friends?
Yes, definitely. I think it's a piggyback off the kind of wellness trends that we've been seeing come to pass. I think a lot of people are really interested in disconnecting and getting away from their phones and not being as reliant on their phones. I think we've become more critical about it from documentaries such as The Social Dilemma and things like that. We're more aware that, if we're not paying for it, we are the product, and so your phone is not in charge of you, you're in charge of it. So, putting it to bed before you, screen time is like quite a relatively new feature that Apple and Android have included, and many apps have included, the screen time feature to sort of make you conscious of how much time you're spending. It's not a surprise to me that my generation wants to do more of that. I think at uni, I did a couple of sort of social media purges where I just didn't go on my phone for a couple of months. I sort of did that quite periodically, usually around exam time, but I didn't feel like I lacked because I lived with my friends.
Right.
Particularly when I went to uni, I didn't feel like I lacked on any socialising because I lived with like 3 of my best friends. A couple of friends lived down the road, so I always felt like I had a sort of like in-person socialising option. I think post-COVID, a lot of people have sort of missed that connection, and when your phone was your kind of only source of socialising and connection with other people, we've probably become quite reliant on it in a way that we wouldn't have been.
Yeah, Dan, what do you make of that? It's an interesting aspect, isn't it? Because Zoe doesn't feel disconnected because she actually lived with her friends, but that tends to not be the case for people maybe of a slightly older generation.
No, absolutely. This is, one of the highest uses of social media and these other things, and also the smartphones are, is the silver surfers. So those silver surfers are a different generation. But I think the young lady's absolutely right that, COVID, we had something like, 10 years worth of digital transformation in a year because of COVID. There's a lot of changes, not only hybrid working and, this really affects the future of work, but also the way that people were viewing things. But also we used our phones loads more because we had to. And now when people are realising we can start seeing our friends more, we can go go, do more traveling. We can be a bit more in the now and enjoy nature and each other's company. I don't think it's a bad thing that we're not, viewing Netflix as much or using social media as much. I don't think we need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It might just be the fact we need to go back to kind of pre-COVID times for some of our socialising, not for all the great other things like, remote working and hybrid work, because that's great for the environment, but for other things, I think nothing better than meeting someone in a cafe or a pub and having a face-to-face chat, is it? You can't replace that, I don't think, even with WhatsApp and even with FaceTime.
And so I wonder if you're from a different generation than I am, and I remember having to make a meeting place with somebody, and you had to be there at that time because there was no other way of getting in touch, or maybe you did have, eventually a phone.
I think my first memory of social media was I was in primary 7 when Facebook came about,
right.
And everyone was getting Facebook and nobody had any idea what it was. And then before that, it was MSN and Bebo.
So that's early, isn't it?
I think because I was like a child at that time, I was probably still being dropped off by parents, and so they were getting me to the right time at the right place.
Yeah.
But no, there wasn't a time before then.
It's so interesting though, because as you say, you were so young at that point, and so your generation is grown up in this world, submerged in it, and it seems to be your generation that are potentially being the first people that are seriously really thinking about separation tactics from it.
I think it comes with the mindfulness aspect, and I think it also comes from, I remember at high school as well, so many arguments and random sort of conversations you'd be having with people outside of school, and cyberbullying, and that whole wave of stuff that came about came from, I think, being on your phone constantly. And so I think coming to uni and sort of having more freedom to see people and to live with your friends and that kind of aspect. But then coming out of uni, and now I'm sort of post-grad and working, it's a great way to keep in touch with people. But I also think with the whole mindfulness trends, people are trying to do more things in person, going for walks with your friends, going for coffees with your friends, spending time in person. Again, with this dumb phone trend, you are just phoning and texting, so it completely cuts out the whole aspect of social media that I think is particularly the focus with the introduction of people having dumb phones. It's sort of taking it back to, I will chat to the people I want to chat to, I'll keep up with my friends, and I'll have a way of keeping in touch with them, my friends and my family, if I live away from them. But it sort of cuts out the unnecessary bombardment of photos and videos and the sort of feeds of people maybe bragging about their life. It's sort of this like curated image of yourself that subconsciously makes you think worse of yourself. It's sort of cutting that away and just keeping it with like the connection aspect.
Absolutely. Dan, before we let you both go, is a dumb phone still the dumb phone that I remember from my kind of teenage years? Is it still as dumb as it was? Or are there added features creeping in now?
There are added features, of course, creatures, and now it may not be quite Snake, and it might be in colour and other things, but it is still pretty dumb. But I think, as the young lady was saying, it's a clever way of disconnecting. And I would also add, especially in the new world of artificial intelligence, I think it's a very clever generation that starts to look at social media and not believe everything they see on it, because that is the reality. And as she rightly says, sometimes Instagram and things like TikTok aren't great for mental health. So all hail the dumb phone to some extent.
Absolutely. Interesting chat with both of you. Thanks very much. Dan Sodergren, tech expert, Zoe Daniel, a journalist, Gen Z,